When I first took the contract with the Forestry Service, I wasn't thinking about danger. I was thinking about the dead, the silence, the clean air. Something that would scrub me out and reset me. The job was to clear a line of old-growth stumps in a dense section of timber outside our county, Oregon. Most of them had been logged decades ago, left to rot or stand like decayed teeth in a jaw no one remembered. I was alone for most of it. Chainsaw, wedge, axe for leverage. The terrain was steep, the days long. The forest floor in that part of Oregon never really dries, not even in summer. It's always spongy, full of black rot and old needles. The kind of place where sound goes weird, muffled and close, like you're always in someone else's house. About 2 weeks in, I started noticing the stumps. Not the ones I was cutting. Different ones. They were already exposed, clean around the edges, with fresh sawdust at the base. But I hadn't cut them. They weren't on the list. At first I figured someone else had gotten ahead of me. Maybe another team swinging through, checking off jobs before I got there. I asked my supervisor, Jim, during one of our infrequent check-ins. He frowned and said I was the only one assigned to that section. No one else had access, and no one had cleared any stumps ahead of me. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the sawdust. It had been fresh. Still damp like wet flour, which meant someone had been there within hours of me. The weirdest thing was the spacing. The new stumps formed a perfect line that extended well beyond my map boundaries. Straight as a snapped string. Heading deeper into unmarked territory. I followed it the next morning. Left my gear and just walked. Maybe it was stupid, but something about that line was wrong. The way the stumps were spaced, uniform in a way no old-growth logging ever was. Like someone, or something, had measured them out by hand. Every 20 feet, exactly. I started checking. From stump to stump, 20 feet. Every time. I went further. After the 6th or 7th stump, the undergrowth got thick. Brambles like wire, roots that seemed to reach out for your boots. There were no trails anymore. The forest started to feel closed. Like walking deeper into lungs. The 11th stump is where I stopped. Because it was warm. Not metaphorically. Literally warm to the touch. Radiating heat like a living thing. The moment my palm hit the top, I jerked back. The barkless surface was steaming slightly, and beneath the moss I saw something carved into the top. A circle, with a single vertical line through it. Like an eye, just starting to open. I turned around and walked back. Didn't run. I didn't want to believe I was scared. When I got back to my gear, it had been moved. Not far, just a few feet. But everything was repositioned, laid out neatly. Chainsaw centered on the stump I'd left it next to. Fuel can upright. Gloves folded. And on top of the gloves, a small wooden carving. Rough, crude, but unmistakable. It was a tiny man. No face, no arms. Just a little figure, legs fused, head bowed. I left the forest 2 hours later. Told Jim I had food poisoning and drove 3 towns away before I stopped. That night, I dreamed of the stump line. In the dream, the stumps were full of teeth. Wide mouths yawning in the moss. And all of them were humming. I told myself I wouldn't go back. I even deleted the maps, stripped the GPS pins, boxed up the work gear. But I couldn't stop thinking about that last stump. The warmth. The marking. The little wooden figure on my gloves. A week passed, then 2, and every night I saw the line again. Not just in dreams. I'd see flashes while brushing my teeth. In the pattern of fence posts. In sidewalk cracks. A line that pulled. 3 weeks after I left, I drove back. I didn't tell Jim. I didn't bring the chainsaw. Just a flashlight, a notebook, and a single-page map I drew from memory. The forest greeted me the way a house greets someone who never really left. Quiet. Thick with wet air. I followed the line of stumps, counting. 1, 2, 3. Each exactly where I remembered. The spacing perfect. Like someone had set them there to measure the world. When I reached the 11th stump, I stopped. It wasn't warm this time. It was wet. Slick with something darker than sap. The carving was still there, but now there was another one beside it. A second symbol, same circle, but the vertical line was split, branching outward like roots or veins. Or fingers. I took a step back, and my boot landed wrong, just wrong enough to sink. Not into mud. Into something hollow. The ground gave with a wet crack, and I fell hard. The soil around me collapsed like it had been carved from beneath. I landed in a pit maybe 5 feet deep, no wider than a coffin. My flashlight flickered as I rolled to my side. The walls weren't dirt. They were bark. Smooth, gray bark, like a hollow tree laid sideways. On the far side of the pit, carved into the wall with what looked like a claw or blade, was the same symbol from the stump. This one was larger, deeper. And underneath it, a series of smaller carvings, stick figures in a row, arms linked. 12 of them. My flashlight died. I froze. Listened. For what, I don't know. Something moved above me. Slow steps circling the edge of the pit. Then another sound, lighter, sharper. Like tapping. Wood on wood. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. The air felt wrong. Too still. Like time had taken a breath and refused to exhale. When I climbed out, I didn't look around. I walked fast, not running, but fast enough that I could feel my body buzzing with it. At the edge of the marked zone, just before the trailhead, I stopped. A new stump. It hadn't been there before. Fresh, pale wood. Clean. And sitting on top, another wooden figure. This one was different. It had no head. I left everything right there. Hiked out, drove until I hit a gas station, and told myself I'd imagine the whole thing. Just forest madness. Too much time alone. Sleep deprivation. But that night, I woke to a smell, wet bark and gasoline. I live alone. I keep my chainsaw locked in the garage. But when I went to check, the garage door was open. The saw was resting on my workbench, and next to it, a fresh carving. Cruder than the others. Still wet. A stump. With something crawling out of it. I moved the next day. New job. New town. But it's been happening again. Not the dreams, those stopped. Now it's my backyard. A single stump. It wasn't there last week. Each morning, it's a little closer to the house. And this morning, I found the first carving on my windowsill. Just a circle. With a line through it. I think the forest is still measuring. And I don't know what happens when the line is complete. The morning I heard the tree fall, I thought it was a car crash. A deep, concussive thud that rattled the windows and made my coffee jump in the cup. I live alone in a small forestry cabin off Route 12, part of a fire watch program. My job is to monitor regrowth zones, photograph clearings, log animal sightings. Nothing fancy. But that sound wasn't normal. It didn't echo like chainsaws or thunder. It was close, and heavy, and final. I stepped out onto the porch. Everything looked the same. Mist clung to the ground like film. Birds were still chirping. But something in the air had changed. I grabbed my radio and hiked out. The regrowth zone lies northeast of my cabin, about 2 miles through gradually thickening timber. I followed the marked path until the smell hit me, rich, earthy, sharp. Like wet rot and something metallic. I rounded a bend, and that's when I saw it. A massive old-growth pine, easily 100 feet tall, collapsed across the trail. Not cut. Split at the base like it had been twisted out of the ground. The stump was jagged, wet with sap, surrounded by thick black mud. The tree itself had landed oddly, not fully horizontal. Its upper third had vanished into the gully, bent like a finger pointing underground. I circled around to inspect the base. That's when I noticed the soil. It wasn't just disturbed. It was moved. Piled intentionally, like a grave. Something about the split stump looked wrong. The core was dark, nearly black, with deep grooves spiraling outward. I leaned closer and realized they weren't natural. They were fingerprints. Dozens of them. Pressed into the wood like the bark had been soft clay. Long and narrow. Some too high for any person to have reached. I turned off my radio. Something about the air around that tree felt, watching. Not watched. Watching. The difference is subtle until you feel it. I backed away and marked the location on my GPS, decided to radio it in once I got back to the cabin. But before I left, I did something I still can't explain. I touched the stump. It was warm. Warmer than the air around it. And vibrating, very faintly, like something deep underground was moving. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared, because I couldn't stop thinking about it. The tree hadn't just fallen. It had been pushed. And I don't mean by wind or erosion. I mean physically forced down. Around midnight I finally drifted off, only to wake less than an hour later. Not from a sound. From the smell. That same sharp, rotting tang. Except now it was inside the cabin. I got up and checked every corner. Nothing. Doors locked. Windows sealed. But the smell kept intensifying, like something had just walked through the room and left a trail behind. I checked my boots. They were still damp from the hike. And there was something stuck in the tread. A piece of bark, but not pine. It was too smooth, pale, like driftwood, and curled inward like a shell. I set it on the counter and went back to bed. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Not the crash. A voice. Whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it was coming from outside the window, just above the tree line. Low and steady, like someone muttering into soil. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just listened. And waited for morning.by sunrise. The whispering had stopped. The smell, too. It vanished with the light, like a dream you only half remember. I went outside to clear my head, and what struck me first was the silence. No birds. No wind. Just thick, padded stillness. I made coffee and stood on the porch until the trees started looking back. Around noon, I radioed in the fallen pine. Standard report, location, estimated size, possible hazard. I left out the warm stump. The fingerprints. The whispering. I shouldn't have gone back. But something about that tree had stuck its hooks in me. I needed to see it again. Needed to prove to myself that it was just a tree. I followed my own boot prints. The path was colder than before. The mist didn't lift even as the sun climbed higher. When I reached the clearing, I stopped cold. The tree was gone. Not cut. Not cleared. Gone. Like it had never been there. The ground was smooth again, the stump whole, no sign of damage. Even the mud piles were gone. I walked up and touched the bark. Cold. Dry. No spirals. No heat. But something caught my eye, a shape in the undergrowth. I pushed through the brush and saw a second stump. Smaller. Hidden. Fresh. Its surface had been carved into. Deep, careful etchings, lines, curves, shapes I didn't recognize. At first. Then I leaned closer and felt my stomach turn. It was a face. My face. Crude, rough, but unmistakable. The jawline, the eyes. And below the face, carved symbols. Some ancient, some I swore I'd seen on the inside of my cabin, scribbled faintly near the crawlspace. That's when I heard the sound again. Not the whispering. Something lower. A groan. From beneath the ground. The air shifted. Like something had inhaled. A gust of wind blew through the pines, sharp and warm, carrying that smell again. I ran. Didn't stop until I was back at the cabin, lungs burning. Locked every door, checked the attic, the crawlspace. Nothing. But on my kitchen counter, where I'd left that strange bark fragment the night before, was a new object. A wooden carving. Small, smooth. Another face. Not mine. Eyes hollow. Mouth open. Screaming. I burned it in the stove. That night, I packed everything I could into my truck. I didn't even radio in my resignation. Just left a note. I planned to head south, maybe back to the city. Sleep in crowds. Forget this. But I couldn't make it past the county line. Every road out was blocked. Not by people. Not by barricades. By trees. Fallen pines crisscrossed perfectly. Some so large I couldn't even see their tops. GPS failed. Phone dead. I turned back, thinking I'd lost my way. But when I got back to the cabin, it wasn't my cabin anymore. Same structure. Same siding. But the windows were gone. Replaced by black slits. The wood darker, swollen. And the door, once plain pine, now had carvings. Deep spirals. Symbols. My name. I drove. I drove until the trees thinned, until I found a gas station lit with buzzing lights and human voices. I sat in that lot until morning. Eventually, I found a motel with decent walls and no trees nearby. I haven't gone near a forest since. I moved east, took a job in a library. Somewhere quiet. Predictable. But a week ago, I found something behind the building. Just a stump. Ordinary looking. But warm. And when I checked the back door the next morning, someone had scratched something into the wood with a knife. A single line. Underneath it, in tiny, careful letters. We remember how you fell. They never told me what happened to the last guy. Forestry contract work always comes with gaps. Files marked incomplete. Forms with initials instead of names. I was hired to finish a survey out near Creel Lake, a dense pine basin rarely accessed since the fire 10 years ago. The original crew had mapped most of it, but the final quadrant was still unlogged. My job was simple: finish the grid, tag any damaged timber, and report anomalies. The temporary field station was a prefab unit hauled in years ago. Half-rotted door warped, generator temperamental. Inside, I found remnants of the last crew, old notebooks, trail maps, and a coffee mug half melted in the microwave. I noticed something strange in the logbook on day 2. One of the previous surveyors, SD, had marked the same clearing 3 times. Same coordinates. Same timestamp. Only the notes changed. The first said, small burn scar. Old growth intact. Proceeding east. The second, burn scar seems larger. Scorch pattern inconsistent. Trees around edge look wrong. The third was just 2 words scrawled hard into the paper. Don't go. Naturally, that's exactly where I went. It was a 3-mile hike from base camp. The air was wrong the moment I stepped off trail. Cooler, like the sun wasn't quite reaching that patch of forest. The birds stopped somewhere around the halfway point. Even the bugs. That's when I realized the clearing wasn't on my GPS. Every step forward made the map jump slightly, like it was trying to realign but couldn't. When I finally stepped into the clearing, I understood. It wasn't that the trees were burned. It was that they had been burned from the inside out. Their trunks were split upward like lightning scars, hollowed into columns, but with no sign of external flame. The bark remained. The needles remained. But the interiors, cored like rotten fruit, were blackened and echoing. The soil crunched beneath my boots. It wasn't dirt. It was ash. Thin, dry, and uniform, as if laid out intentionally. Then I saw the pole. Just left of center in the clearing stood a tall wooden pole, stripped of bark, sharpened slightly at the top. Something hung from it. Not a body. Not cloth. A bundle. Wrapped in cord, humming faintly in the breeze. I took a step closer and stopped dead. There was a footprint next to the pole. Fresh. Deep. It wasn't mine. And it wasn't going anywhere. Just one. Pointed toward the pole. Like whoever left it had stepped into the clearing, stood still, and then disappeared. I didn't touch the bundle. I didn't photograph the trees. I just turned around and walked straight back, ignoring the trail, pushing through undergrowth. I didn't stop until I saw the edge of the prefab roof. Inside, I flipped through every page of the old notebooks. Found one that wasn't part of the logbook, just loose pages. Scribbled drawings of hollow trees. The pole. The bundle. A pattern of footprints, always one per clearing. The last page was smeared, but I could still make out the words. "It doesn't like when you count." I didn't understand it then. But that night, I dreamt of ash falling like snow, and one footprint beside my bed. When I woke up, the floor was dirty. I checked my boots. Still cleaned out. I told myself I'd leave first thing. Pack up, call in a mechanical failure, make up something about fumes from the old generator. Anything to not have to explain why I'd found a footprint in my cabin. Why I hadn't cleaned it. Why I couldn't make myself touch it. But I didn't leave. Instead, I found myself walking the grid again. Not to survey, not really. I needed to see if it was still there, the clearing, the pole, the bundle. I needed to prove I hadn't imagined it. I brought a camera, a fresh notebook, and a knife. I followed the same trail as before, counting my steps. Exactly 1,437 paces to the edge of the clearing. But this time, the clearing was gone. No burn-scarred trees. No pole. Just normal forest. No thinner than the rest of the basin. As if the whole site had been erased overnight. I stood there for a long time. Listening. Waiting. My skin felt too tight. My breathing was loud. That's when I realized the forest was breathing with me. Not wind. Not sway. Breathing. Each time I inhaled, the trees leaned slightly inward, needles rustling in rhythm. Every exhale made the soil crackle with fine ash. I walked backward until the sound stopped. When I got back to the station, the footprint was gone. In its place was a smear. A dragging mark, like something had been pulled. Across the floor, up the wall, to the ceiling. I opened the hatch to the crawl space and saw nothing. No movement. No sounds. Just a smell, sour and warm, like wet rope and heat. I told myself again, I'm leaving. Tonight. But night fell faster than it should have. I lit every lamp in the prefab, turned the generator up high. And waited. Notebook in my lap. Knife in my hand. Around 2 a.m., the humming started. Not from outside. From beneath. At first it was subtle. Almost like distant machinery. Then it sharpened, like tuning forks pressed to bone. The light bulbs dimmed. The hum grew teeth. And then I heard the footsteps. Not on the gravel outside. Inside. One step. Then nothing. Then another. I held my breath. The steps stopped next to my cot. The floor creaked slightly, like something was leaning down. Then, I blinked. I was standing in the clearing again. Except now it wasn't empty. The pole was back. The bundle unwrapped. And on the ground beside it, 4 footprints. Mine. And one more. Bare. Deep. Toes spread unnaturally wide, as if whoever left it wasn't used to walking upright. The bundle wasn't cloth. It was bark. Layers and layers of pale bark, wrapped into the shape of a man. Not carved. Molded. Inside I saw a face. SD. I recognized him from the old station photo, the man with the cleft chin and bent ear. But his eyes weren't closed. They were peeled open, like bark torn to reveal flesh. He was whispering. I couldn't move. The ash beneath my feet began to swirl, rising into the air in slow loops. I heard my name. Not shouted. Not spoken. Breathed. I fell. Hit the prefab floor with such force the cot skidded. The lights were out. Generator silent. And in the corner of the room, a footprint. Still damp. I left before dawn. Walked until I found the service road. Hiked 9 miles until a ranger patrol found me. I didn't tell them about the pole. Or the bundle. Or SD. I just said I'd gotten lost. They believed me. Until they opened the notebook I'd dropped. Every page was filled. Not with notes. Not with drawings. With the same sentence, over and over, in handwriting I didn't recognize. We all leave one. It started with a missing tape. We were flagging a parcel east of Baxter Hollow, thick with overgrowth. Classic multi-acre plot survey, mark the boundaries, record landmarks, prep for thinning. I was working with Connor, a quiet guy who didn't talk much except to quote acreage stats or tree density numbers. Efficient. Trustworthy. That morning, we were running perimeter flags, tying plastic survey tape between trees. The tape roll was bright orange, nearly fluorescent. Hard to lose. But halfway through the second corner, it vanished. I'd clipped it to a belt loop. Checked 3 times. Gone. Connor didn't laugh or say much. Just gave me a spare from his kit, and we moved on. Then the markers started shifting. On our second pass through the flagged route, we found that half the ribbons were missing. Not fallen. Not windblown. Removed. Cleanly. The bark still held shallow impressions where they'd been tied. Some trees had faint, straight slices in the bark, just under where the tape had been. Like someone had cut them free with a scalpel. We stood still for a while, listening. You know that silence when birds suddenly stop? The forest held its breath. Then Connor said something I'll never forget. They don't like being boxed in. I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer. Just started reflagging, faster than before. That night, we camped at the southern edge of the plot. The site was cleared years ago, flat enough for tents, and just remote enough that no sound made it past the ridgeline. I couldn't sleep. Something about the missing tape felt wrong. Not random. Not wind or animals. I checked the flagged line again around midnight, flashlight in hand. That's when I saw it. A fresh ribbon. Not ours. Black. Tied with a knot I didn't recognize, tight, looping, almost decorative. It fluttered in the wind just once before going still. I followed it for maybe 30 feet before stopping dead. There were more. A new line. Perfectly parallel to ours. Same intervals. Same height. But entirely black, and running opposite our direction, cutting across instead of surrounding. A cross line. Connor didn't believe me in the morning. Said maybe another crew had been through, or some hunter marking trails. But there were no other crews in the region. And no hunters used black tape. He suggested we pull out. I agreed. We packed fast. But the lines were closer now. 2 new black markers had appeared overnight, one tied to a tree next to our tent, the other just above the latrine trail. I checked my pockets before we left. Inside my coat, right pocket zipped shut, I found the missing roll of orange tape. Soaked. With what looked like sap, but smelled like meat. That's when Connor finally told me. He used to work down near Rikers Ridge. Similar gig. Flagging parcels. They had a name for the thing that cuts lines. The line cutter. Something that didn't like grids. Boundaries. Maps. The story was, if you drew too many straight lines in the wrong forest, it came to unmake them. Quietly. Cleanly. He said he once found his tent slit down the middle. Not stolen from. Not moved. Just opened. Like it needed to breathe. I thought he was screwing with me. Until we got back to the truck. Because our tires were slashed. Not punctured, sliced perfectly along the treads. And under the windshield wiper, folded once. A black ribbon. We spent the next hour trying not to panic. There was no signal. No tools strong enough to patch the tires. We debated hiking back, 6 miles through brush with no trail, but Connor didn't want to leave the vehicle. Said he had a better idea. We'd follow the ribbons. The black ones? He claimed they led somewhere. That the last time he encountered them, they eventually stopped at a clearing. He'd found help that way, sort of. A parked truck. Lights left on. Engine still warm. He never found the driver. I asked why he hadn't told the company. He just looked at me and said, "Would you?" We started walking. The ribbons led us downslope, into thicker underbrush. The further we went, the weirder the spacing became, less uniform. Some were tied high, just out of reach. Others were knotted to saplings barely wider than fingers. And then the markers stopped. Dead in front of a felled tree, maybe 15 feet long, stripped bare. Its bark was removed, and the exposed wood beneath was etched with dozens of notches. each one about the width of survey tape. Connor crouched beside it. "There's one for every marker we laid," he said. I counted. 43. He was right. That's when I noticed something beside the tree. It wasn't tape. It was skin. Thin, papery, and dry. Strung like a ribbon between two low branches. It fluttered slightly when the wind passed, but didn't break. There were freckles on it. A birthmark. It was human. I turned to Connor. His face had gone pale. "That's the thing," he whispered. "The cutter doesn't take your lines. It takes your boundaries." He stood up, trembling. "We made a box," he said. "Now it wants what's inside." I didn't understand until I looked behind us. The forest had changed. Not overgrown. Not unfamiliar. Just altered. Every path I thought I knew was gone. The trees were too close now. The trail was wrong. Our own orange ribbons had disappeared completely. We walked in silence for what felt like hours, moving only towards sunlight. Around dusk, we reached a small ridge and climbed it. The truck was there. Exactly where we left it. Tires still slashed. But something was off. It was facing the opposite direction. Not just turned, flipped. Hood where the tailgate should be. License plate upside down. No tracks in the dirt. No sign it had been moved. Connor didn't go near it. He just pointed. In the truck bed was a bundle. Wrapped in black tape. Shaped like a man, but with no head. That's when Connor started walking the other way. He said we couldn't stay. Couldn't even look back. "Once it's marked you," he said. "That's it. No more straight lines." We walked until the trees thinned. Slept in ditches. Ate what we had. Eventually, we hit a service road. Flagged down a fire crew doing smoke checks. They didn't believe our story, of course. Said we'd had some kind of panic event. Disorientation from carbon exposure. They found the truck. Empty. Tires intact. No ribbons. No bundle. Just the word cutter scratched into the windshield from the inside. Connor quit. Moved south. Never flagged again. Me? I still survey. But I never use tape anymore. I whistle. I sing. I walk in spirals. And I never, ever draw a straight line. Because last month, someone mailed me a package. No return address. Inside, a piece of black ribbon. And a map I didn't draw. With a square traced in the center. And the words, "You're inside now." I wasn't supposed to be there that night. Double booking is rare in forestry, but it happens. 2 crews flag for the same quadrant, one gets rescheduled, the other doesn't get the memo. I was filling in for Carter, who'd called out sick. The area was steep ridge terrain near the Saw Creek Basin, floodplain timber, thick underbrush, unstable footing. Known for mudslides. They called it a third shift run. Not a real shift. Just a nickname we used when someone went out late alone. No radios, no support. Just a compass and a checklist. My job was simple. Verify that the hillside hadn't shifted after last week's storm. Photograph the base markers. Be in and out before dark. But dusk came fast. I hit the ridge edge around 6:30, already losing light. The slope was slick, covered in broken pine. The ground was spongy in places where it shouldn't be, like something had tunneled beneath. I found the first marker, a fiberglass pole, yellow tape, tag number scratched clean. Odd, but not unheard of. Erosion can chew up plastic. Still, something about the tape felt stiff, like it had been dipped in resin. I moved on. The second marker was worse. Gone entirely. In its place, a shallow pit. Not random. Circular. Clean edges. I crouched beside it, shining my flashlight in. Just dirt. No roots, no insects, no sign of a stake. But the floor of the pit was odd, lighter colored, packed smooth. I took a photo. The flash lit up something nearby. A face. Not a person. A mask. staring at me from behind a deadfall. I jumped, slipped, scrambled backward. But when I shone my light back, there was nothing. Just brush. Empty branches. No face. I told myself it was a trick of the shadow. Light bouncing off moss or bark. But something in me, deep and ancestral, did not buy that. Still, I pressed on. Third marker. Gone again. Another pit. Only this one had footprints around it. Bare. Wide. Not human. Just two prints. In, then out. Like something had visited the hole, checked it, and left. I turned to leave. That's when I saw the fourth marker, 20 feet uphill, jammed into a tree trunk, 10 feet off the ground. No tape. Just the pole. Driven in like a nail. I didn't photograph it. I didn't get close. I started back down the hill, legs shaking. Every twig snap felt close. Every gust of wind felt like breath. I made it to the bottom of the slope, just past the creek crossing, when I heard it. A deep, creaking sound. Not a tree groaning. Not a branch falling. Footsteps. Deliberate. Slow. Wet. Something was walking parallel to me, just behind the tree line, hidden but close. I didn't run. Didn't look. I just kept walking, counting every step out loud. 37 steps from the base of the ridge to the creek. But I only made it to 35. Because the last two weren't there. The ground just ended. Eaten away. Where the path had been, there was now a perfectly round hole. 6 feet wide. Maybe 5 feet deep. Identical to the others. Except this one wasn't empty. There was something inside. It looked like a person. Kneeling. Arms behind their back. Face down. Wrapped in survey tape. Dozens of strands. Orange, yellow, red, colors I hadn't even used. The figure wasn't moving. I leaned closer. Then it lifted its head. And I saw my own face. I fell backward and hit the ground hard, tearing my arm open on something jagged. My flashlight skittered down the slope, flickering until it died completely. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The thing in the hole didn't move again. Just held that position, kneeling, bound, my own face staring up with blank eyes, survey tape looped tight around its neck like ceremonial cloth. I didn't wait to understand it. I ran. Branches tore at me, mud sucked at my boots, but I kept moving until the path felt familiar again. I didn't stop until I saw the lights of the equipment shed at base camp glowing faintly through the trees. When I got back, the first thing I did was wash the blood off my arm. The second thing I did was check the roster. There was no entry for me. No record that I had been assigned that quadrant. According to the logs, Carter had worked it the day before and completed the scan. No issues reported. No weather concerns. He'd even signed off. Except Carter was still out sick. I'd spoken to him that morning. I checked my truck. The clipboard with my assignment sheet was gone. In its place, a small, folded square of orange tape, tied in a perfect knot. My name written on it in black marker. I went home and didn't sleep. At 2:14 a.m., someone knocked on my door. Not loud. Just one knock, then silence. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. When I opened the door, I found a metal survey stake leaning against the frame. The same kind we used in the field. Its end was sharp. Too sharp. Like it had been filed down. Wrapped around it, red tape with a single word written across it in crude handwriting. Return. I stayed inside for 3 days. On the 4th morning, I stepped outside and saw them. 3 new stakes in my front yard. Driven deep into the lawn. Each one closer to the house. No footprints. No tracks. No windblown evidence. Just the stakes. I called the company. They denied issuing any new orders. No one had been to that quadrant in weeks, they said. Carter hadn't worked it. No one had. I was never supposed to be there. But someone, or something, knew I had been. I decided to go back one last time. Not to the marker site. To the creek. I followed the route precisely, 37 steps from the ridge to the creek. But this time, there was no hole. Just soft moss. Empty trail. And yet I could still feel it. Beneath. The dirt was looser. The air smelled the same, wet, sharp, like pine and iron. And in the middle of the path, a fresh marker. A fiberglass pole. With my name etched into it. Not written, carved. Deep. Like a gravestone. I walked back in silence. No footsteps followed me, but the pressure never left. The sense that the woods were watching. Measuring. Waiting for a boundary I hadn't drawn yet. That was 2 weeks ago. Every night since, I've found new tape around my house. On the windows. Across the porch. One morning, I woke to find it wound tightly around my front door handle. I haven't cut it. I think it's a warning. Or a seal. I don't know what I stepped into that night. I don't know what wanted me there, or why it needed my face. But I do know this. There is no third shift. There never was. There's only the work they don't put on paper. And the forest that always finishes the job.